Welcome back to episode 3 Beyond Skills Training and Consciousness in Education. And today's topic is the invisible curriculum. What shapes a student more, the curriculum we write or the consciousness from which we teach it? Before we begin, I would like to return to the question that ended our previous conversation. Can awareness itself be educated, or is consciousness something that simply develops on its own? Today, I would like to explore a different question, perhaps an even more uncomfortable one. If two students sit in the same classroom, study the same curriculum, learn from the same teacher, write the same examination, why do they leave with completely different understandings, not only of the subject but of themselves? Is it only intelligence? Is it motivation, or could there be an invisible curriculum operating beneath every lesson we teach? Across the world, education has become increasingly sophisticated. Curricula are reviewed, assessments are redesigned, artificial intelligence is entering classrooms, learning analytics are becoming more powerful. Never before have educators had access to so many pedagogical tools, yet OECD reports continue to show increasing levels of student anxiety, disengagement, and declining sense of belonging in many education systems. UNESCO repeatedly reminds us that education must prepare young people not only academically but socially, emotionally, and ethically. So perhaps the challenge is no longer simply what the students are learning. The deeper question is, who is the learner that is doing the learning? As physics teachers, we often speak about visible forces, gravity, electricity, magnetism, invisible, yet measurable. Education is surprisingly similar. Every classroom teaches two curricula. The first is visible, concept, skills, assessment, objectives, ATL, TOK, extended essay, CAS. The second curriculum is invisible. Students are constantly learning how to respond to uncertainty, how to relate to mistakes, whether their worth depends on grades, whether comparison is normal, whether silence is safe, whether curiosity is rewarded, vulnerability is accepted. None of these appear in the written curriculum, yet they may shape a lifetime. Perhaps students remember less of what we taught and far more how they experience themselves while learning. Marcus Raschel's discovery of DMN, default mode network, transformed neuroscience. The brain does not simply become inactive when external tasks stop. It begins constructing the self, remembering, predicting, evaluating, imagining. This is one of the humanity's great evolutionary gifts. Without it, there would be no planning, no imagination, no identity. But there is another side. When this remarkable capacity remains untrained, the same network can become dominated by self-referential thinking. Am I good enough? What if I fail? Everyone else seems ahead. Research by Judson Brewer demonstrates that contemplative practices can reduce maladaptive rumination while strengthening present moment awareness and emotional regulation. Imagine the implication for education. Perhaps the students are not only learning mathematics, they are simultaneously learning how their own mind creates meaning. I would like to invite every educator watching this to remember one teacher who changed your life. Not because of extraordinary content knowledge, not because of perfect lesson plans, but because you felt seen, respected, safe enough to think, and safe enough to ask. Now ask yourself, what is the curriculum that changed you, or the consciousness from which that curriculum was offered? More than 1,000 years ago, the Upanishads asked a remarkable question: who is the one who knows? Not what should be known, but who is the knower? Western philosophy asks similar questions. Know thyself. Socrates invites us to think. Phenom- Phenomenologists such as Husserl explored lived experience itself. William James described attention as the essence of consciousness. Different civilization, different languages, the same inquiry. Today, neuroscience allows us to observe what philosophers could only contemplate. Perhaps education has always been asking two questions simultaneously. What should students know? And who are students becoming while they know it? Perhaps one of the greatest misconceptions in education is this. We often believe that students learn primarily from what we teach, but educational psychology suggests something deeper. Students are continuously learning from who we are while we teach. Our patience, our reactions to mistakes, the way we respond to disagreement, the way we listen, the way we celebrate questions, all of these become part of learning environment. In neuroscience, this is sometimes explained through social learning and emotional contagion. Professor Hatfield and colleagues demonstrated that emotions spread through groups, often automatically. One calm nervous system can influence another. One anxious classroom can amplify collective stress. One emotionally regulated teacher can help students feel psychologically safe enough to learn. Think about that for a moment. Perhaps before students remember our lesson, they remember our presence. Imagine asking a student to solve a complex mathematical problem while they are worried about being laughed at, or asking them to present an idea while fearing embarrassment. Can deep learning happen? Neuroscientists suggest that the brain learns best when it experiences an appropriate balance of challenge and psychological safety. Professor Stephen Progress, through polyvagal theory, proposed that our nervous system is constantly asking one silent question: am I safe? When the answer is yes, curiosity expands, creativity increases, connection becomes possible. When the answer is no, attention narrows, the brain shifts towards protection rather than exploration. Perhaps this is why psychological safety is not merely about well being. It is about learning itself, and suddenly kindness is no longer only a moral value, it becomes an educational strategy. One of the reasons the IB continues to inspire educators across cultures is that it has never defined education as a accumulation of knowledge alone. The learner profile speaks of developing students who are inquiring, reflective, principled, open minded, caring, balanced, and courageous. ETL skills extend beyond content to include self management, communication, collaboration, and reflection. TOK invites a student to examine not only what they know but how they know. CAS reminds learner that education continues beyond the classroom through service, creativity, and experience. The extended essay nurtures intellectual independence and disciplined inquiry. These are not isolated programs. Together, they express a profound educational belief. Who students become matters as much as what they achieve. And perhaps there is one more dimension quietly connecting them all, which is awareness. Not in another subject, but as the quality from which every learner profile attribute is expressed. A reflective student without awareness may simply replay thoughts. A reflective student with awareness begins to observe thoughts. That difference changes everything. Across civilization, educators have asked remarkably the similar questions. Socrates invited self examination. John Dewey argued that we do not learn from experience alone but from reflecting on experience. Viktor Frankl reminded us that between stimulus and response there is a space in which our freedom resides. The Upanishad asked, who is the observer of all experience? The Bhagavad Gita describes the Sakshi, the witnessing awareness that observes thoughts and emotions without being defined by them. Modern contemplative science investigates this capacity through mindfulness, metacognition, and self awareness. Different languages, different histories, yet all pointing towards one possibility: human flourishing may depend not only on expanding knowledge but on refining awareness. As a physics educator, I am often asked whether quantum physics proves consciousness. The honest answer is no. Science has not established that. As an educator, intellectual honesty is essential. Yet, quantum physics does offer a powerful educational metaphor. At the microscopic level, modern physics describes nature of terms of probabilities rather than certainties. Observation changes what can be measured, but that does not mean human thought magically controls reality. The lesson for education is more subtle and perhaps more profound. The future is not fixed. Learning changes possibilities. Every question asked, every misconception corrected, every act of courage changes the trajectory of what becomes possible. Education, therefore, is not merely the transfer of information, it is expansion of possibilities. So, perhaps invisible curriculum is not another framework, it is not another assessment criterion, it is not another educational initiative, it is the atmosphere created every day through attention, through relationships, through presence, the quality of listening, through the courage to admit, I don't know, through the willingness to learn out alongside our students. Perhaps the most enduring lessons in education are never written on the board. They are written into the nervous system of young people, and they remain there long after the lesson had ended. Before we finish, I would like to leave you with one final question. Imagine a student meeting hundreds of teachers over the course of their education. Years later, they may forget almost lesson objectives, most assessment tasks, even many examination score, but they rarely forget one thing: how a teacher made them feel about themselves while they were learning. If that is true, then perhaps the most powerful curriculum we teach is ourselves. In our next dialogue, I would like to explore a question that has fascinated neuroscientists, contemplative researchers, and educators alike. If awareness influences attention and attention influences learning, can awareness itself be intentionally cultivated? Can schools teach it without becoming religious, without becoming ideological, without compromising academic rigor? What does neuroscience actually say? What does contemplative science reveal? And what might education look like if consciousness become part of holistic development? That is where our next conversation begins. Perhaps the real question is not whether consciousness matter in education. Perhaps the deeper question is whether education has ever truly understood consciousness at all. Thank you for being a patient listener and being connected.